being mindful of everybody's busy schedules today as we get started on this Tuesday. Well, welcome everyone to Bagels and Best Practice, Amplifying and Supporting Indigenous Youth. We are happy you're here today. Our agenda, I'll go over really quick. It's really important to start from a good place. I'm going to introduce you to Mentor Minnesota. For those of you, some of you are familiar with us and our work, but for those of you that aren't, we'll go over that briefly, and then provide you with some resources to help really amplify and support this work. We're going to hear from two amazing program leaders that are here with us today and their role and experience of both amplifying and supporting young people. We have Cheryl Cola here and Alex McDougall, and then we're going to provide you with some space at the end with some questions and answer and a place of discussion. So starting from a good place. So remembering the seven grandfather teachings. I decided to start this morning with this because not only do I love this painting that was painted by a young person, and it's called The Circle of Life. Zoe Wood Solomon is an artist and poem. Alex, her computer shut down, but she'll be back. But the painting here is depicting the circle of life, which I think is really beautiful and really goes nicely with the seven grandfather teachings. And if you're not familiar with that, these are respect, love, truth, bravery, wisdom, generosity, and humility. And the idea behind these is that if we practice, and we are all practicing on a daily basis to embrace these teachings, that we will be on the path for a good life, a very balanced way of living. So I just kind of wanted us to just take a minute to get grounded in that, and again, offer gratitude to the seven grandfather teaching. As we're going to be introducing ourselves here shortly, we would love to get to know you. So in the chat, if you would be willing to share your name, your pronoun, the organization, agency, or the program that you're here with us. And what is one tradition you did as a young person that you still try to uplift now? So kind of thinking about that one tradition, maybe it's thinking of those seven grandfather teachings, one of those practices of those, if it kind of gave you some inspiration of thinking back to that. But I'd love you to share out a tradition that you did as a young person, and what do you do, or how do you still try to uplift that now? And with that, I'm going to kick it over to our executive director and also our program coordinator, Vista, Allie. I'll have Sarah kick us off with introductions of herself, and then over to Allie.
Hi folks, I'm Sarah Schaefer, she, her. I'm the executive director at Mentor Minnesota. I'm really honored that you're all here this morning. And I will let Allie introduce herself.
Hello everyone, I'm Allie Ervig and I'm the program coordinator Vista, and it's she, her pronouns. And for the tradition, I'm gonna go with going to apple orchards because I'm trying to do that next weekend. So back to Emily.
That's awesome. Thanks, Allie. I'm Emily Geray. I'm Mentor Minnesota's program director. I use she, her pronouns. I am Anishinaabe. I grew up on the White Earth Indian Reservation in Northwest Minnesota, where my dad is an enrolled member of the White Earth Band. I've been trying to support and amplify young people for really more than, not to age myself, but for more than 20 years. I started out in early childhood special education, followed by working really K-12 with continued special education work, and then most recently behavior intervention. And one tradition that I did as a young person that I still try to uplift now is that we go to my grandparents' home that's still on the reservation at least once a season to visit. So any of you a little bit older folks know that when we say visit, it's just a way of really connecting with family. And that's something that we've always done when we were young people. We would go and grandma would feed us a big meal. And then, you know, we would get to be with all of our cousins and extended family. And we really try to continue to uplift that now. Those of us that can still get together, we do so. And yeah, family and visiting is really an important tradition for us to still uplift now. And I'll kind of bring that back a little bit later when we're talking, but feel free to go ahead and again, share in the chat your name and who you're here with or joining us or where you're joining us from. And then a tradition that you did as a young person that you still try to uplift now. And if you'd prefer not to do that, to share the tradition, that's okay too. We just still love to hear who you are and where you're from. So with that, a little bit about Mentor Minnesota. So we really feel our vision being that all youth have agency and power at home, school, the community, and in the workplace. And really, our mission is to fuel the quality and the quantity of equitable and inclusive relationships. So that means that we want to support you, the adults. We believe in holistic youth development, and then we elevate quality. We want to connect people, so that's the engaging local leadership. We want to expand the movement and also influence systems. So that's just building this out and advocating for young people so that they can have more opportunities to build strong relationships. We're going to be joined here shortly by two special guests. One being Cheryl Cola. She's the program director from the Culture, Language, and Arts Center here, and that's embedded within the Minneapolis American Indian Center in Minneapolis. And I'm excited that she's here today. And we're also joined by Alex McDougall, who I know is also experiencing some technical difficulties, which I often experience myself. So we'll be patient and but excited that Alex can be here too. Alex is the suicide prevention coordinator for Ongdejung here in Minneapolis, and which means in Ojibwe, our home. And so I'm excited for her to be able to share out a little bit of her role and the work that they're doing. Some foundational knowledge before I hand the mic over to our special guest today. I wanted to share this, and just, again, I'm going to really briefly talk about some high stroke foundational knowledge, and that's really to just kind of set us up for understanding what it means to work with Indigenous youth, and really, you know, understanding that there are 573 federally recognized tribal nations in the United States. So that's really understanding the presence. So interrupting the narrative that implies that Native people have vanished. That's not the case. And remembering that Native people are a vibrant part of our communities today. And so this number doesn't necessarily include the tribes that have not been recognized, but nevertheless, they have been here since time immemorial. So I just kind of want to point that out. Aaron Carpella, he is a map maker, and I've seen some of his work with his maps. And if you're able to, I'll be sharing out a lot of resources at the end of this. I encourage you to look at that and just really kind of spend some time reflecting on the map. It's really a beautiful piece. And also some more foundational knowledge, the speaking and walking respectfully. I have the turtle up in the corner, as we love turtles, but it's also just kind of reminding myself too that there are certain practices and things that we all need to do to try to speak and walk respectfully and in a soft manner. So a couple of things to point out. The term Indian used in federal law, however, individuals and entire communities may differ in how they would like to be identified. So that might be American Indian, Native American, Indigenous, First People, First Nations. So again, really coming into any conversation culturally humble and out of curiosity and being willing to ask rather than assuming. And the other part is recognizing that you're always on Indigenous lands. And so really learn the Indigenous names of the land that you're on so you can be, respectful of where you are and that you can identify the traditional people and the homelands in that place. And with that, I'm here with you today on the unceded homelands of the Dakota people and our Anishinaabe relatives. I honor and give my Anishinaabe ancestors and living relatives. I offer them gratitude as I am thankful for their sustaining of this land and the resources. In Minnesota, I will also share this out with all of you in my wraparound email. I do think this is a great resource for all of you. So if you click on any one of these boxes, it will bring you right to the different reservations or Native nations that are within Minnesota. So there's 7 Anishinaabe, that includes the Chippewa and Ojibwe reservations, and 4 Dakota communities. And so you can kind of bounce around and maybe educate yourself a little bit further on these different nations that are here right in the state of Minnesota. More foundational knowledge that I felt was really important is understanding that there's great diversity in Native communities. And we can really not stress enough the importance of educating yourself as well as connecting with elders and culturalists in your community and region for guidance and assistance in your youth program development. A couple of tools and supports that can help us amplify and support Native youth. One is that understanding, like I just mentioned too, that there's no one universal identity for Native youth. Native youth own identity development, it's very individual, and what community they're from varies. So mentors and mentoring programs can really support them by acknowledging and looking at the strengths and complexities of different communities, and always using the asset-based or strengths-based lens, meaning looking at a community with all of the beautiful things that are going on there, all of the resources and the wisdom that exists within communities, rather than looking at it as something that needs to change or needs to be fixed. That's not the case. Always looking at it from a very strength-based or asset-based lens. And I'm also going to share out a tool that I'll talk a little bit about really briefly, but it's called the 5 Ps, and it was developed by a professor at the University of Oregon. And it's really just talking about all of these things combined that, again, I'll share out and talk a little bit more at the end, making sure that I leave enough space for our guests today. But again, the 5 Ps are 5 things to consider when you're working with Indigenous communities, and that's place, presence, perspectives, political nationhood, and power. And again, I'll go into these a little bit later. And with that, sort of kind of encompassing all the things, and I know this is high stroke and kind of brief, but really wanted to just provide you with some basic foundational knowledge and how we can really support and amplify our Native youth. And that is with all of these pieces. Again, it's not an end-all be-all list for things that we can do to really uplift and infuse the programs that are here in Minnesota, but these are just some different ways and things to consider. So that is the landscape, critical mentoring, identity, and that's sort of recognizing where you're from and your views on things, the Native youth identity, resources, and then a call to action. So with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Cheryl Cola. Again, Cheryl's joining us today. She's the program director at the Culture, Language, and Arts Center here or network, excuse me, here in South Minneapolis.
Okay.
So over to you, Cheryl.
Bonjour, Anishinaabe, Doug, Wabano, Mikanaki, Kwe, Indigenous, Asabe, Koni, Zaka, Gunning, Donjiba, Nigazan, and Dame. Whenever I introduce myself, I try to include our language. I'm Anishinaabe. That's what I prefer to be identified as my tribe is Anishinaabe. A lot of people say Ojibwe. That's okay too. I am the program director for the Culture Language Arts Network, and we are located in the Minneapolis American Indian Center in South Minneapolis. My program is it's for families, not specifically youth, but we really encourage families to learn together and come together and practice together and those types of things. So currently we have a really strong language program. We have Dakota language and Ojibwe language, and it's taught on several different levels. So we have like an intro 1, an intro 2, intermediate, and advanced. So if you start as a beginner and you take a course, you should, after 1 or 2 times, be able to advance to like the second level. And then you keep growing and learning, and then you're into the intermediate, and then hopefully you're into the advanced. And everything that we do, we infuse language. So we also offer culture activities such as hoop dance. And then we also offer Mashika dance, and then we offer a family language activity. It used to be called a family language table, but I switched it up to an activity because I feel like we're really seeing that for kids to retain language, it's really important that parents or guardians or responsible adults are learning with them. So when they go home or they're in their regular day-to-day routine outside of a learning setting, they practice together. So we've developed this family language activity, and we've also learned that kids are really good at learning by moving. So if they're playing a game, or if they're dancing, or if they're whatever they're doing, we're infusing language into that. And that's every week we do that, and it's actually tonight, and that's from 6 to 7. We have some really awesome consultants that teach our language classes. And then we also have a monthly, what is called a family fun night, and that happens every 3rd Friday. And in that activity, we have several different things happening. So we'll have like an art demo, and we try to do art activities around traditions. So like last month, our theme was wild rice. So we did some art activity around that. And then we usually have a physical activity. And then we have like a learning activity. There was actually like a mock of harvesting wild rice. We had a fire, we had the rice, the unprocessed rice, and then, did the parching and then the sampling. And then we also have a food demo. And our food demo is done by our Gatherings Cafe, and it's all Indigenous foods. So he did some wild rice pilaf. It was really cool to see. But anyway, that's kind of what we do. Once a month, we get together and we really show some things we do as traditions, and we infuse language into that. And then quarterly, we have a powwow. So this Friday, we're having a powwow. If anyone is interested, everyone is welcome. I know it's a little scary because of COVID. Everything that we do in person, we practice safety as much as possible. So that's our program. And I really believe that you can't really have a culture without language, and you can't have language without culture. Just like at a powwow, you can't have a drum without dancers and dancers without a drum, that kind of concept. Because if you're having like a cultural activity and you're not infusing that language into it, so much gets lost in translation. Like there's so much lost if you're not utilizing language as much as possible when you're doing traditional things. Like I said, for myself in the chat, when I grew up, I grew up in northern Minnesota. My family comes from southern Ontario, the Couchiching Reserve, and then the Boyce Fort Reservation. The border crossed us, even though we're like an hour away from each other. There's a lot of relatives that are from Canada and Minnesota. So my family is from there. But anyway, I grew up there, and growing up there, we did a lot of traditional things that I didn't know was traditional until I moved here. And by that, I mean, you know, we always went fishing. You know, we always had to clean the fish, fillet the fish, freeze the fish, cook the fish, you know, like it was all summer long we fished. And then we would go like blueberry picking, and we would have so many blueberries, and, you know, we dry those, and then we would go deer hunting, ricing. So like we did all of those things as a family and as a community, really. And then I moved here and I was really shocked. I was like, whoa, where's the land? Where do I find this, or where do I do that? But I learned and I found out that the community here in Minneapolis and St. Paul is very resourceful. We have very beautiful and large Indian population, Native population of several different tribes. And, you know, we have a lot of resource. Where I live or where I work in South Minneapolis, there's our community has a lot of social services, I would say, for families. I've worked in our community for probably 27 years now. So I'm very well connected as far as what resources are out there for our people. I've worked in school. I've worked in a school setting. So I know our youth very well. I've worked with our youth and families for, you know, always. And today it's not so much youth focused, but we do have youth that participate, and we do have, you know, some parents and some grandparents. I really don't know what else to say. I really appreciate what you shared, Emily, with the grandfather teachings and the 5 Ps. Didn't really know what I didn't expect that. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I could visit with you all day, Cheryl, and I love that you brought up blueberry picking, because I forgot a little bit. We haven't done that in so long, but we used to do it as kids and loved it. Though I don't know how how much we were actually helping pick. I think we ate as many blueberries as we picked, to be honest. Like, I don't know. And a lot of times my cousin, we would sneak off and eat blueberries, and most, you know, wanted to just be together. But I appreciate you uplifting that a little bit, as I, you know, kind of forgot about blueberry picking as a young person. But and like you being from, you know, northern Minnesota, you know, working and living and being part of a community in a rural area can look different than in an urban area. But I think, like you now living near the Twin Cities, really, it's amazing the resources and community. And though many of us are from different tribes, different nations, we still come together. And I know a couple of weeks ago when we were at the Memorial March, you can really get a good sense. So even at a powwow or any event, on how it feels like home when we're together. And I think, and that's important for young people. I think especially now, as the world is a lot to navigate, not just with COVID, but a lot of different things going on. So I appreciate you bringing all that up.
One thing I also want to mention is, there's those components of who we are as people, but there's also our traditional ways, and that's kind of how I am and how I grew up in that way. And I think the most important thing for any youth when it comes to identity is to get their Indian name, what we call an Indian name. And it's a ceremony. And I feel like when you have that, you really have a foundation, a really strong foundation, and you can identify with that name. My Indian name is Wabinol Mikanak, and it's the turtle woman that comes from the east, and it makes a lot of sense to me, in so many ways, and I really identify with that, and it really gives me a sense of belonging. Like I understand, who I am, why I'm this way, why I do that, why am I different than that, because it's just really all about that. And I try to really encourage and try to connect our youth to, people that are gifted, that are able to give a name. I really try to encourage our young people to do that, to receive their Indian name. I didn't want to leave those traditional ways out. We have a lot of ceremonies, we have medicines, we have everything that we need to take care of ourselves. And it's really important to learn as much as you can and participate in that. I have a question. It says could you speak to how a young person might get their Indian name? So what I mentioned is in our culture, we have people that are gifted. Everybody's gifted. Everyone has a gift. Everyone has a purpose, and it's really up to each individual to find out what that purpose is. But some people dream, and I'm a dreamer, and some people will dream, and they'll be shown things by spirits, and they will go to like a mentor, an elder, medicine person, and talk with them, and then maybe they're told that, you have a gift to, give names. And our community is pretty small. So like, I know a lot of the people that have that gift to give a name. So what I will do with a youth that's struggling, I'll ask them, or I'll ask their parents. Usually, the people will get their names as babies. They usually will have that name before their English name, but usually it's as parents or guardians or whoever's taking care of the babies. It's a responsibility for them to seek out someone that has that gift to name them. And then as you grow up, all the way up until you're old enough to ask yourself for yourself, I would say probably like 16, 17, 18, then you're able to, ask for yourself. But if a youth came to me and said, I want an Indian name, I would go to those people that I know that can provide that. And we go to see them together, and that youth would offer that medicine person or that person with that gift, they would offer them some tobacco. And it's not traditional tobacco. It's the tobacco, the organic tobacco that we grew. It's not commercial tobacco is what I'm trying to say. We also use red willow, and I'm gonna just show you. I don't know if you can see, but this in here is red willow. I harvested this last spring, I think it was, but that's about what I have left. But you offer them some of that, and they'll instruct you from there. They'll say, okay, usually what we do is we'll fill our pipes for so many days until that dream comes to us, or until a message comes to us, and then you'll have that dream, and then you have the naming ceremony, and that youth will receive their name, and then they'll be given instructions with that name as well. So it's really a beautiful thing. And there's so many, yeah, I didn't want to leave that part out of our ways, you know, because that's really important for our kids. I feel also that our kids can, they're kind of getting away from us, you know, our culture and our ways, and we're really being creative on how to keep them interested. And I'm sure you all know that everything's technology today, right? So how do you fit culture into that? You know, it's really a challenge. In fact, all of our language classes are virtual, and it's a good thing because we have our numbers have like quadrupled. You know, we went from 25 to over 200 people that are interested in learning language. You know, that's a good thing. But like I said, the cultural component, it's really hard to do virtually. I mean, you can do some things, but this is what you saw. You know, you can't feel it, you can't smell it, you know, so it's a little different. There was another question in here. Share your thoughts on youth learning and living in their culture while supporting themselves and families. So here's the thing, with our youth, you really have to practice it. You know, you really have to practice our ways. You can't just say, oh, I want to dance, have regalia made for you and then go out there and dance. I mean, you really have to watch, you know, you have to participate, you have to observe, you have to learn, you know, otherwise you're just gonna go out there, dance, but not get like all those teachings that go along with it, whatever dance you're doing. Like for me, I used to be a jingle dress dancer, and I dreamt of my first dress, you know, and I went through that whole ceremony to get my first dress, and then I started dancing. But it's kind of that way with youth. I know our youth have a lot of responsibilities that are supporting their families, but it's really up to them if they can if they're responsible enough to support a family, they're responsible enough to really, you know, if they really want to learn, they'll learn. You know, they just start coming to things, they just start joining things, they start reaching out to things. Or as a community, we have a responsibility too, to reach out to our kids, you know, and get them responsible or get them interested in, you know, and support them. I don't know if that answers it, but.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point, you know, the youth initiated mentoring too, essentially, you know, but really asking young people and allowing them to use their voice and visit about language, visit about different cultural traditions. And I think the more that young people feel connected to the conversation, the more open they often are. And maybe it takes some time, but the more open that often they are with wanting to learn more and engage more when it comes to cultural practices, I think, you know.
And I also think that like our culture is very, you know, we're all about mentoring, because I had 5 mentors growing up, you know, 5 women mentors that taught me everything. But that was really important. But I sought them all, you know, I as a young lady, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew how I wanted to live. So I sought those, I watched these elder ladies, or I asked, you know, around, who do I go for this, you know, like that. And so I had those mentors. So it's really important. Mentors are really important.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, yeah, no, I mean, all such good points. And I see Alex is busy beading. I'm not sure what Alex is working on, but Or is she sewing? My
No,
eyes. I should really be
I'm definitely engaged. I do better when
no.
I have something to fiddle with.
Yeah, no, and I wasn't saying that at all. I was curious, and then kind of led into wanting you to, if you're able to introduce yourself, Alex, and then sort of at the end too, we can all talk and have Cheryl and Alex share a little more. And if folks have more, other questions, then we can talk about them a little further too. But maybe Alex, if you don't mind, if you wanted to introduce yourself, and you can show us what you're working on too. I'd love to see. If you don't mind, but you don't have to. Totally up to you.
Oh, I'm so shy when it comes to things. Like
Okay, yeah,
I like to maybe I'll get some courage.
Yeah. Well, even like myself, I'm not, a big public speaker. So even this, it's kind of like stepping out of my comfort. But once I, start talking, it gets a little bit easier. But some of us, are introverted a little bit more at heart. But I do want to introduce Alex McDougall, as I'm happy that she's joining us today as well. So I'll hand the mic over to you, Alex.
Guys, all let me know if I'm not answering a question, because I think I start to babble once I start to talk. So I'm Alex McDougall. Good morning, everyone. I am from White Earth Nation. My family's from there. I come from a strong line of women. Let's see, I have grown up in South Minneapolis for probably the last 12 years. I would say since I was about 14 or so. My family's really involved in community work. I worked at Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center for a while. And now I'm at Indayang. Well, I moved over to St. Joe's for a while. So I have a pretty heavy background in residential treatment, and then also shelter work. So about 2.5 years ago, I moved over to Indayang, and I actually work at Minoshki. So it's the permanent supportive housing off of University. So we have an emergency shelter, which is 5 to 17. And a lot of those are child protection involved. And then we have our transitional living program, and that is for youth 16 to 21. And they can stay, it's typically a 90-day stay, or they have to find an alternative place to live. I mean, that's not how I meant to say it, but the focus is finding housing and then also kinship relations, so folks can have a safer place to stay outside of homelessness or wherever they were at prior to entering that program. But with that, we see a lot of extensions. And then I work at Minooshki Indayang, so that's a permanent supportive housing program for Native youth 18 to 24. However, they can stay there for as long as they would like. So, I mean, it's just at the time of intake. And so there we offer, I'd say pretty full circle, services. So there's myself and another person, and we do all of I should make it clear, I'm transitioning from housing to suicide prevention. So I've officially transitioned over, but I'm doing both right now. So as far as Minooshki goes, we have myself and another person, and we do all of the housing case management and then just basic case management as well. And so we work a lot with coordinated entry within Ramsey County to get those Native youth placed. And I think the nice thing about, I'm kind of anti-coordinated entry. I don't know if you guys know a lot about it. But the nice thing as far as coordinated entry goes is we were able to get something passed prior to opening Minooshki that our Native youth go to the top of the list when it comes to vacancies. And so we're able to meet all of those folks that need it versus having to wait for what could be years to get housed. So that's the nice thing, I guess, about our program. and how housing goes, at least. So there's myself and that person. And then we also have a youth and family therapist on site. And then we also have Safe Harbor and now suicide prevention, which is myself. And I'll kind of go a little bit more into that. And then let me see, who else do we have? We have 24-hour front desk staff to monitor, and then property management is all on site. And so we have all these services on site for the youth. And then we also have a clothing closet, a cultural activity center, a residence store, and food, like a food room. So all of those basic needs are able to be met. I think that as far as, you know, everything goes, it is interesting. And I think that Cheryl kind of hit the nail on the head as far as being like, it takes people to reach out. And so I think that also with the age group that we're serving, and then also just that aspect of being in survival mode, we don't see a lot of that until about 1 year after housing, when people are really engaging with those services. And so kind of what my role is right now is it's pre and postvention when it comes to suicide. And so that is working with the youth, families, and then overall community. And eventually a crisis response team will be put together within the community to be able to respond to suicide. And so kind of what that's looking like right now is eventually folks will be able to be trained on what's called Safe Talk and then mental health first aid. But in the meantime, we've been doing a lot of groups. Well, I've been doing a lot of groups for the last, I would say 6 or 7 months. And I'm really excited for this winter and what's to come. But a lot of those groups are just kind of circulated. It kind of started as like just beading and sewing and folks being able to come together for, you know, an entire day. So we would have the room open for the entire day and people could come and go as they please. So it didn't feel as much of a timeline, because I think that that's what serves our folks best. And it started pretty small and now we're up to maybe 8 or 9. And we do allow people to bring their families too, because I think what we see often is when our young people are going through or experiencing homelessness, there creates a big disconnect with family members and just kin within the community. So we offer it up to everybody. So we have a lot of folks that are bringing their siblings or their moms. And so we do have a big, I would also say most of our participants are typically female or female identifying. And so that's kind of where we're at with that. And it's also turned into a big peer support. And so I just kind of sit back and let them go. It's interesting what happens, like as things just fall together naturally. It's a really beautiful thing. But as far as this winter and this fall goes, I think kind of, so I'm still learning, like as I think we all kind of are. And so it's been a really beautiful thing to be able to do the work that I'm doing right now, but then also be able to learn and offer the things that I know, but also be able to learn with the folks that I'm learning with. Because I'm like, I would say I'm pretty close to the age that the folks that I'm working with. I mean, there are pretty short gaps, there can be. And so I think when it just comes to community events, I think that, or I shouldn't say events, but just community, it's interesting kind of what happens when you just send an invite or you're like, hey, do you want to come to me, come do this with me, or do you want to come do that with me? I think that that's how I've found my biggest engagement piece. And then also just, I think, especially from like my age, it's been nice seeing people feel comfortable with knowing that I don't know everything either. And talking about that and being honest with that, and also just being humble or trying to be. So that's kind of what I have. I don't know if folks have questions. I get really I don't want to say flustered, but I lose track of what I'm doing in my own head because I get nervous. So if anybody has questions, I do well with questions, and I can typically answer them pretty well.
No, you're doing great, Alex, and we appreciate you being here. Like you, I'm very similar where there's so much I want to learn and talk about, and then kind of get all tangled up in my own nervousness. But you did a great job, and I appreciate you that you're out doing, this work, and that, even though you're in transition, you still have such a kind and humble heart as you approach it. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think, really, I always tell the story of my moccasins, where I try to remind myself to always walk softly, because I know that I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything, and always seeking to be curious, and not assume things, and really offer conversation with all those at the table. So I appreciate that. It sounds like you're doing a lot of that too, and including those young people. And you mentioned too, being vulnerable. And I think that's also huge when working with young people, is that if we can be really transparent, and often share maybe a part of our story, often they will be more willing to share a little bit about their story as well. So, but yeah, I appreciate you bringing or highlighting some of the amazing work that you do. And yeah, and I'm happy to open up the floor if folks want to unmute themselves and ask a question to either Cheryl or Alex, or if you want to share it in the chat, we can read them from there as well. And I do see we have one of our affiliate friends who I would call extended family. Jason is here too from Mentor, Iowa. So I appreciate you jumping on the call too, Jason, and that you're here. So I know that you weren't able to catch the whole presentation so far, but yeah, if you have any questions, we're happy to talk about that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Brad. We had Jim Bear Jacobs speak to our church last night. And he said he's noticing a growing movement positively with youth becoming more interested in their native culture and heritage. And I was wondering, how do young people, starting in middle school on up, how do you guys help them learn culture? And then when they have to make career decisions about where they'll go after they graduate from high school, whether it be, further education or going directly into the workforce, how do you help them carry that with them as they move, if certainly they don't need to leave the reservation to work, but for those who want to leave and maybe earn more money, just seems like there has to be a hard choice that they make between, fulfilling careers inside the reservation or moving out into the white work environment. So is that a barrier? Is it a tough thing for the young people to negotiate?
I think for me, there's a couple things. So I feel that when we create programs, or we sustain programs, or whatever it is, I feel it's really important that we are inclusive of our culture and language, and that's really important. So like if a Native youth were to join an after-school program, that there's culture, infused into that program. And I also feel that once you have that connection, you don't lose it. And I feel like as a Indigenous people, we all have that. Some of us have grown up with that. And for me, I grew up with that. So I left, my small little town, excuse me, by the reservation, and I came to Minneapolis. And here's how small my mind was at the time. I thought the university was one building, like a school. It was a very scary thing. But my brother, my oldest brother, he graduated from the university, and he really pushed me into getting out of there, and getting an education. So I feel like I don't know the answer to that. All I can say is once our youth are engaged, participate, into something that interests them, that's culturally relevant, I feel like they make that connection and they carry that with them. And I go back to, that identity that I was talking about, encouraging our young people to get an Indian name, encouraging our young people to participate in as much as they can. Because I feel like when you do that, you have a really strong sense of identity and a strong foundation. And that's something that can never be taken away from you. You'll carry that wherever you go. I don't know if I answered that. I think I answered it as best I could, because that's a really difficult question. Like, so many of our youth are afraid to leave the reservation. So many of our youth don't have a whole lot of positive role models that have left the reservation, like my brother did, and really pushed me into going to school. So I guess that's the best I can answer. I don't know.
Yeah, and you did a great job, Cheryl. I love your insight on it too. And I think, with any young person, it's important to really, again, using that asset-based lens, looking at all of us, as you shared earlier, Cheryl, that we all have a gift, we all have something to offer, and really instilling that in young people early on so that they feel confident enough to be proud of their culture, be proud of, knowing their language and having strong foundation in their identity. That's, again, culture, language, culture, it's all encompassed, and really building that young person up so that regardless of where they decide to go or life leads them, that they'll have that to lean into, and knowing that they are enough, right? That going into a workplace, even if it's predominantly white, that they are enough, and that they can be proud of who they are, what they can contribute, and always infusing and embedding everything that they do with their culture. So I think it's not changing, it's uplifting, and really allowing young people to feel like those seven. That's why, starting this off with the 7 grandfather teaching, I love that. I think it's such a beautiful wisdom, and that if we can really connect young people to those 7 grandfather teachings, that they will feel more confident in going into the world too, that they'll be on that good path. I did see there was go ahead. Sorry.
There's a question in the chat about how to engage Native youth who sometimes are resistant. And that's very true. Our youth are mostly resistant. It's all about trust, building trust. So sometimes it's just sitting and being quiet, by them. Sometimes it's trying to find something that interests them and then talking to them about it. It's really keeping boundaries and space And then our kids are always watching us, we're always being watched. So, you know, they can probably fill you out in the first 30 seconds. They'll know if you're genuine or not. So for me, of course, I had an advantage when working with our youth is because one, I'm Native, so they can identify with that. But I would always just, be the best kind of role model I could be for them. How I talked, how I acted, how I treated people. I was just really a genuine, caring person, kind. And it takes a lot for our youth to confide in somebody because there's not a whole lot of trust that they have lived with, I guess. So it's really about however you can without being too pushy or too aggressive, build trust with them, build that trust, and then start, slowly talking with them, and then after they learn that they can trust you, they'll start opening up. That's my advice to how you engage with them.
I would also say, to kind of piggyback off of that, I think in my experience and for me, like as far as professionally, I would say that consistency is a big thing, because I think what happens a lot, or what can happen a lot, is like, even with programming or groups or whatever, I think that engagement piece can be really difficult. And like, I know when I first started doing groups up maybe a year ago, once we got the whole COVID thing kind of figured out as far as like how to navigate that, there was like 2 months where I did group every single day, or not every day, every week, and people didn't show up, not one person, but I continued to do it. And then slowly people started trickling in, and it ended up being a really big, beautiful success. And I think that seeing that you're there and seeing that you're putting in that work, and also listening and being aware, being self-aware, being aware of the community, and also I think just meeting people where they're at is a big, big, big advantage to the community itself. Because some people might be like, yeah, I'm ready for work. Great. Some people might be like, I got out of bed today and that was awesome. And I think that as long as you're meeting people where they're at genuinely, and not putting your own agendas or perspectives or lived experiences onto somebody else, I think that that is a really great way to engage youth, because it's about them, it's not about us.
Yeah, I love that. Way
That's
to,
so important that you meet them where they're at. I'm so glad you said that, because a lot of times, our kids come to school, with so much stress and weight on their shoulders because they had stayed up all night taking care of, their baby brother, or, maybe they don't have clean clothes, or maybe they're hungry, or their parent is, using, or whatever it is. And then they come to school and they might have an attitude. You just have to allow them that space, and then just, meet them where they're at. And I really appreciate that you said that. That's so important.
And then I just want to say one more thing, because I do better in conversations. So I think that even when it comes to, and I think that this is a big deal, because I know that there's a lot of youth programming and there's a lot of family programming too. But I think that when it comes to, how do I say this? The funding, the organizations, all these things, if there's youth programming, but things aren't being done at home with parents or caregivers or the bigger family system, there is a high chance that that work is going to crumble, because one person can't heal without overall healing, or at least the opportunities to. So that is portrayed in housing, that's portrayed in the systems, that is an overall umbrella of ways that our community needs to be taken care of in order for our youth to succeed. Because a lot of it gets put into different things and not enough of it gets put into the family systems and the youth that we're serving, because like you said, Cheryl, like if kids are coming to school and they're up all night taking care of someone or feeding baby or, you know, whatever it is, that work and that instinct to go back and take care of whatever needs to be taken care of is going to be first priority. So that was it.
No, that's great. And such great points. I do wish we had more time, and I would love to continue the conversation further too. I did share contact information, and I will reach out with a wraparound too with some local resources here in the Twin Cities, and then in really Minnesota wide, if folks and programs are looking for additional resources in our area. And Miigwech, I am so grateful for both all the work you do, Cheryl, all the work you do, Alex. I'm able to stay on a little bit longer, but I know some folks have to probably go with other time conflicts, but I appreciate your wisdom and you being willing to get up early and join in this conversation this morning. We're very grateful for both of you and the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Language. Oh, cool. You took language with Mimingwesi.
Yeah, last spring it was so good. Me and my sister did it. So we'd have, oh no, I thought it was me. Me and my sister would like make dinner every week on Mondays and do class. It was really nice. So I just wanted to point that out.
He's a good teacher, and it's funny because his name is Mimingwesi and it means little people,
Mhm.
but he's